we're starting to work on the skirt now, and the first thing that you need to do is to take the two short ends and fold those in 1.5 centimeters. So you can measure that on with a seam gauge and pin it first if you want to do that. Sometimes I just measure and iron as I go. And because this is quite short, probably 2 pins are fine. And press that. And we use the word pressing when we're sewing because we're setting things in place. It's a little different than ironing a shirt. This is part of what makes a quality garment when you're sewing is the pressing that you put into it while you're putting it together. Now this one, you can see here it's got this selvage. It doesn't look striped, and it's slightly wider than, well, it's not, it's okay. If it's a little wider than 1.5 centimeters, you could fold this just slightly wider, but it actually is going to be all right. So I'll just do the 1.5. And again, some pins. And when you are pressing on pins, don't slide your iron over them because you can scratch the bottom of your iron. I'm just putting the iron on and holding it in place, and then you get a nice solid press there. And then once I take them out, I press it a little bit more just to get the pin marks out. Now if you want, you can iron the whole skirt right now. This skirt is going to be gathered into the top part that we were just working on. So in order to do that, we are going to do some basting along the top edge, and basically the top can be whichever side you choose. So to do the basting, stitch length on 5, or the longest stitch on the machine, whichever. Some machines have different stitch length settings, and so you want 5. So we have these two edges we just pressed. We're going to leave them pressed, or folded rather, and we're going to be stitching 2 rows of basting. The one row is going to be at 1 centimeter, so I'm lining up with the 1 centimeter line. And you do not backstitch with basting, and you want quite long thread ends. So make sure these are not too short because we need those threads later. And so I'm going to sew this entire length at 1 centimeter. And again, don't backstitch at the other end. When you take it out, long threads. Cut so you have threads hanging off. Again, very important, we need those threads. Go back to the start. Now you're going to line up on the 2 centimeter line. And stitch again the entire length, no backstitching. Now we're going to make this piece of fabric fit between this mark here and 1.5 centimeters from the edge here. I added a mark here. I didn't mark the dots there earlier. So we want it to fit between those markings. So we're going to use this basting that we did in order to do that. So you take these long threads and you are going to use 2 of them. There's 4 threads here. There are 2 on the top and 2 on the underside. It doesn't matter which of those 2 you use, but you cannot switch which 2 they are. If you're going to use the top, you always use the top. And I'm going to hold these threads, and then I'm going to move the fabric along the threads and bunch it up. And this is why you need that longer stitch length. You can still do it with a shorter length, but it's much, much harder and more likely that the thread breaks. And if the thread breaks, well, you get to start all over again and restitch those rows of basting, because it needs to be a continuous piece of thread in order for this to work well. And I usually pull from both ends. Again, if you're using the top threads here, you must use the top threads here. Otherwise it's like tying a knot in it, and when they meet, they won't move anymore, and you need to be able to adjust them. So you're going to pull and pull, and you want to be gentle because, again, like I said, if you break your thread, you have to pull it out and start over again. And this piece of fabric is about 115 centimeters wide, and so you're going to pull up quite a bit of bunching in order to make it fit on the waistband. Now if you pull too much, which I just did, then you just pull some off. And redistribute, so a little more. So that's pretty good there. So now we're going to be pinning this together. So you're going to pin right side to right side. So I'm going to put a pin in the one end here. And just to secure that, I know it's hard to see on this blue, I'm going to tie a knot in these threads on this side, not on the other side yet, so that it doesn't pull off on that side anymore. And now I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to pin the other end so that I know where this needs to fit. And now I want to distribute this so I don't have flat spots and bunchy spots, so it's gathered the same amount evenly all along here. So it's just a matter of shifting . I've distributed my gathers here and pinned it in place so it's even with the top of the band, and the gathers look even along the middle here. So now we're going to sew this together, and I am resetting my stitch length to 2.5 or 2.6. And I'm going to sew these two together 1.5 centimeters from the edge. So if you've sewn everything accurately, you should be stitching right down the middle between the two rows of basting. And again, you're going to back stitch. And I just use my fingers to help hold the gathers in place while I'm stitching, so that they stay nice and smooth and even. And back stitch at the end. Cut your threads. Check the other side of your stitching to make sure that you didn't catch anything up there that shouldn't be caught. And this looks pretty good. And then I fold it up and look at my gathering and see that it looks even along here. And so at this point, we no longer need this basting. So you can remove that stitching, and you can use a seam ripper. And I need to pull this. I can pull, the easiest way to pull it is from the right side because that's where I was pulling previously. And once I get a piece of thread there to hang on to, I can just pull this all the way out. And pull off the back. Now the one that's on the top, I don't need to remove that one because you won't see that one, it's inside the seam. So I'm just going to cut the threads off the end so that they're out of the way. And I'll do the same on the opposite side. And then we are going to, I'm just going to trim the skirt side a little bit shorter than the waistband side. So I'm going to grade the skirt. At the ironing board, just press above the stitching to flatten out that gathered edge above the stitching. Don't press below it right now because it will squash the gathers. And we don't want them squashed on the body of the skirt. And then flip it over. And I'm just going to push it up and press. Again, not pressing on the gathers, I'm just pressing above them. And then this is something I should have had you do earlier, but we can do it now. I want you to fold the top edge 1.5 centimeters towards the wrong side and press that. And if you want to pin it first, measure and pin it, you can do that. I actually can do 1.5 without measuring. I'm setting a good example for you here by measuring, but I've been sewing enough years that 1.5 is an amount I can measure without hardly thinking about it. So you want it to look like this. So we've pushed up the top and we've pressed this towards that 1.5 centimeters. And the other side looks like this. We'll press out this part later and I'll show you how to press that. This is the right side of the waistband, wrong side. You're going to take the right side and fold it right sides together in half so it's right on top of each other. And I'm going to put a pin in the one end. And I'm going to do the same on the opposite side. And you can see one side has a longer edge that sticks out than the other side, and there's a reason for that you'll see later. And now I'm going to stitch this. So on the short side, this side here, I am going to sew even with the edge of the skirt here. That should be, if you've sewn this accurately and pinned accurately, 1.5 centimeters from the edge. So I've got this lined up on the 1.5 and mine is accurate. Just making sure that the edges are lined up there. And you're going to back stitch. And so right across to the other edge and back stitch. It's almost like back stitching across the whole thing because it's quite short. And then you're going to trim that, so cut some off, do a little angle cut at the folded edge, cut the inside one shorter, grade it, and then this is folded out. And I'm using my shears very carefully there. So you have a nice finished edge there. So same thing on the other side. Now this seems a little bit long to me, so I'm actually going to sew a little more than 1.5. I think I'm going to sew 2.5 centimeters there. And again, back stitching. And cutting the threads. And again with this one, I'm going to trim quite a more off. I'm going to trim off about 1.5 centimeters. At the folded edge, a little angle cut. Grade the one side shorter than the other. And then that too gets flipped. So we have two finished ends on our skirt here. Now got this here, and this is my seam where I sewed the skirt to the band. So I'm going to just cover that seam and pin all along this piece. When I finish off the band, I also want to attach the top and the straps to it. And so to do this, take the top part, and we need to find the center of it. So I just fold it in half, and I'm going to put a pin there for the center of that. And then I also need the center of the skirt. So you're going to fold this in half, but you're not including this overhang piece. So you want to line up the edges of the skirt when you fold this, and then find your center. And I do have a pin at the center, and just so it's more distinguishable, I'm going to double pin right there, just so I know that's the center on the skirt. And then you lay this right side down, put this on top of it, line up your center there. And I'm lining up the serged edge on this piece with the bottom of the band. And I'm going to pin that in place there, and then I'm going to pin the two ends. I think I'll do a couple more pins in between as well, just to make sure that it's going to stay in place when I'm sewing. So that's in the center. Now the straps, I want to put halfway between the end of the skirt and the end of this apron piece. So I'm going to measure that, and that's, don't have centimeters on here, it's 3.5 inches. So that will be 1 3/4 inches is the center. So I'm going to put a pin upside down right there, and this one should be the same. And then take your strap piece, and when I do this, typically what I do is I think about when this is done, this strap is going to crisscross. They tend to fall off the shoulders of the bear if you don't crisscross them. So I'm going to angle it slightly towards the center. So I'm lining up the bottom of the strap with the bottom of the band, except that I'm angling it slightly towards the center. And I want to center the strap where that pin is that I put in, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to pin that one there. And I'm going to do the same with the other one. And now this is ready, pinned in place, and I'm ready to sew this. I have quite a few pins here, so I need to be careful while I'm sewing because I have pins on the bottom as well as on the top. So I'm just going to be feeling for where those pins are. I'm going to start at one end, and I'm going to do a row of stitching completely around the outside edges of the band. So I'm starting and doing it about 3 millimeters from the edge. And regular stitch length 2.5, back stitching. And cut your threads. So you can see I've got stitching top and bottom all the way along the band, and then you should check the back and make sure that you have caught the band on the back, and if you haven't, you might need to go back and do some fixes there, but this looks like it's pretty good. So our skirt and our top are together now. So we want to turn this into a circle. So you're going to unfold, actually put this right sides together, unfold these ends that we pressed and pin this together. And if you've sewn everything accurately, this should all line up nicely here. And we are not going to sew all the way up because we need to be able to get it on the bear. So we're going to sew to approximately 3 to 4 centimeters from the top of the band. So there's going to be a little bit of an opening there. About 3 centimeters. And what I'm going to do here is stitch right in the crease where I pressed it. And that crease should be 1.5 centimeters from the edge. So you can either, if you can't see the crease very well, you should be able to line up on the 1.5 centimeter mark and sew from there. And again, regular stitching, back stitching. And I'm going to sew up to this pin up here. And back stitch. So now this is sewn into a circle, and you can go back and give that another press, but you already pressed those seams, so they should be lying pretty flat right there. So almost done our little dress for the bear.